Welcome back to Prime Your Life. Today, we've got a pricing specialist in the chair, and you might be thinking, well, what's the relevance? Well, anybody in retail, business, or entrepreneurship will have to price a product or service somewhere, and it could be that you are leaving coins on the table by not pricing effectively, or you could be pricing yourself out of the market. And I have David Abbott with us today, who is a pricing guru, pricing specialist, and spends all day talking to people about price. David, welcome to the show today.
Thank you, Chris, and hello to everybody listening and watching.
Well, it's a curious question straight from the get-go. What on earth makes you want to talk about pricing for every minute of all of your waking days, David?
It's not quite every minute. I do a few other things too. But I think price is one of the neglected parts of marketing. A lot of people will have heard of the 4 Ps of marketing: product, price, place, and promotion. And in fact, these days, we added a people, processes, and physical evidence. So there are 7 altogether. And most of those things, you go down to Waterstones, you can find books and books on strategy. You can find books and books and books on the digital side of marketing, anything to do with websites, social, you name it. You can find books and books on advertising, promote, all sorts of stuff like that. Pricing, you're lucky if you can find 1 or 2. And it's one of the most important areas in many respects. If you're trying to improve your bottom line, you can cut costs. That does work, take some cost out of the operation. That'll improve margins. There's a limit to how far you can go. You can try and increase volume, and then your fixed cost is shared over a larger volume of business. But growing businesses is a challenge. It's not an easy, trivial thing to do. But often, just 1 or 2% more on your prices, if your net profit is 10% and you add 1% on average across all of your prices, your net profit is now 11%. Just goes straight through to the bottom line. So you've increased your profitability by 10%. And it's something that a lot of organizations stress about. The feeling is, if we increase our prices, the world's going to fall in, we'll lose every single customer, or just the act of increasing our prices will prompt every single customer that we've got to go out there and start doing a comparison us against the competition. And the reality is, and I've worked with many, many companies on their pricing, the reality is that they communicate a price increase and hardly anybody ever notices.
For people that are just thinking, what's the benefit for me to continue to listen? What sage advice do you think I'm going to pull from David Abbott's head? What kind of things are you going to tease us with?
Wow. Well, hopefully what we'll cover are a few different aspects of pricing, and in particular pricing communication, because that's where the psychology of pricing really comes in, that are pretty easy to implement, generally cost nothing, can be done almost instantly, and usually make quite a significant difference to the organization. Since we last spoke, I was keynote speaker at a conference down in London, estate agents, and there was one of the estate agents who were present. They'd heard me speak a year previously, and the guy came up to me at the end and shook my hand and said, "Oh, it was great to hear all of that again. That I implemented what you said a year ago, and it's already added, I think he said 250,000. It's already added 250 to my bottom line, and I'm expecting this year, to be around 300,000. Well, that's just from a half day, morning, going through some of these concepts regarding how we communicate a price in a way that makes a higher price stickier. He'd applied them, and that had been the impact on his bottom line.
I saw you speak at just that type of event.
Yeah.
And the reason I wanted to bring you into this conversation today was because in that half an hour, I have never written so many notes that were so useful for me. And actually, yes, I have also implemented some of that. So let's try and help the audience with a little bit of that.
Sure.
Let's say I am now launching a new program. It's a new coaching product or it's a new service. And I'm thinking, I reckon it's worth about that. Is that a good tactic for me in terms of pricing it?
Not really, but it would not be an unusual tactic. Pretty well everybody's approach to pricing is, and that feels around about right. The 2 most common approaches to pricing are to add all of your costs up, divide by the number of units that you think you're going to sell, stick a margin on top, and that's your price. That's cost plus pricing. It's easier in some areas than others. It's easier in retail, for example. I worked with a flooring company who wanted to go online. I was helping them with the e-commerce side of the business. And being a pricing guy, I looked at what differentiated them in the marketplace, what value they added, and therefore what they ought to be able to charge for their prices. sat down with the MD, and he basically just got a red pen out and drew a line through everything I'd written. Antico, 38% markup. Condine, 41% markup. So if his input costs, if the price that he's buying it at, if that goes down, his price on the market goes down. If his input costs go up, his price goes up. It's a very straightforward way to price, but it's only looking at the inputs into the business. It's not looking at the value that you're delivering. The other thing that companies typically do is they have a look at what's happening in the marketplace. And if they think they've got a superior product or service or whatever, then they might come in at a premium price. They think they've got some cost efficiency, some operational efficiency. They might come in at an economy price or just follow the average in the marketplace. And those two approaches to pricing are absolutely fine, but they are ignoring the value that we're delivering to customers. And for me, that's the most important aspect of pricing. If we clearly understand the value that we are delivering, and we clearly communicate that value, then we ought to be able to charge a more appropriate price for that value that we are delivering. So if you were launching something new, one of the first things that I would do if I was working with you is I'd try to figure out exactly what value means to the customer. And some of that might be tangible, money terms. You're launching a new service, and that for every £1 million worth of turnover, you can increase the turnover by a further 5%, and all else being equal, that drops through to the bottom line, whatever their operating profit is. So there's a number that you could put against that. But there are intangible elements of value as well. It may be that the person who's making the decision, they want to look good inside the organisation. If they bring on a real hero who helps to transform the organisation, that's improving their chances of progressing within the organisation. If they make a mistake and bring the wrong person in, that could damage their career within the organisation. So value is a complicated thing, but there are processes that we can go through. We work it out, and based on that value, we should have then a better idea of what we want to charge in the marketplace and how to justify it.
All right, so let's just strip down a basic product like a handbag. And we've got a Gucci handbag and an Aldi handbag. And the pricing points would be dramatically different, but effectively the bag is still fulfilling the same purpose, which is lipsticks, purse, whatever else, carried from one point to the other with a handle.
Mm-hmm.
How does Gucci create that extra price point that the customer is willing to pay for?
This is where brand comes into it. And price does not live in isolation to everything else that you're doing as a business and everything else that's happening from a marketing perspective. In many respects, brand is the fundamental element of marketing, how you create and build a brand in the marketplace. And brand doesn't just mean the logo, the identity. Brand means exactly what your potential customers think about you when they encounter that logo. What attitudes do they have? What beliefs do they have about your brand? How much do they desire it? What does it mean to them? And the key thing that you're describing there is the luxury brands, which tend to be exclusive. They're not trying to be mass market. They don't want to. If you're buying one of their handbags, the environment has got to be congruent with the brand experience. It's the way the handbag is displayed, the way the people behind the counter dress and talk to you, because it's creating that brand desire. So that's the key thing with something like Gucci compared to an Aldi or whatever it was, a handbag. Functionally, they're both doing the same thing. They allow you to carry some small items around. Emotionally, they're doing entirely different things, and people pay a lot of money for that emotional context.
Good. If you were in a positioning board meeting and it's Jaguar, and I know Jaguar have just repositioned themselves, and I think they've said they're prepared to lose all of their market share apart from 15%. Would you think that you should be at the table at that point to advise on price as part of that brand evolution?
Yes. There's a lot of discussion opinions we could get into with regard to Jaguar. I suspect from their point of view, it's Hobson's choice. They were facing a very long, slow decline, despite the XF and the XE being good cars that regenerated demand for a period. It's hard to compete with the likes of Mercedes and Audi and BMW. They've got to completely reposition themselves in the marketplace or they're going to die. And it's not because I think that I would necessarily have any unique insights in terms of that repositioning or whatever, but I think every organisation should clearly consider price while they're going through that strategic planning. Too often, the planning takes place, you get almost towards the end of the project, you're about to launch, and somebody says, okay, how much are we going to charge? The work should have gone into that a lot earlier. And which is not to say that people don't necessarily have some idea of roughly the price, because if you're putting a business plan together, you've got to know what your sales levels are. And sales are simply number of units that you sell multiplied by the price. That's the total revenue. So you've probably got some idea, but right at the beginning, if we think about how we can maximize that price, that makes a hell of a difference to that business plan and the direction that you might take.
Back to your e-commerce model, from a psychology of how we position things on a website, and let's just say we were going back to that flooring example, can we, I'm going to use the word manipulate, can we coerce the customer to make a decision based on how we present the price on a website?
Yes, we can. These are often described as nudges, and I understand you hesitating over the word manipulate, because a lot of what we talk about sounds like manipulation, but in some respects it can be. In most respects, I don't consider it to be that, because what we're talking about is are the defaults. Lands on your website and searches for a particular product, or goes to a category page. Let's say it's a handbag website. So they go to a particular category page. There's I don't know, 60 different handbags that they could choose between. Those handbags have to be presented in an order. One of those handbags is going to be the first handbag that somebody sees. Now, you could default to lowest price first, or you could default to highest price first, or things like that. Most websites have a different order. It might be the most relevant, or the highest margin, or the one that's most popular. Or in every case, there, you're making a choice regarding what somebody's going to see as the first item. And that first item creates an anchor. So whatever you see as the first item, it becomes a reference point against which all the other items that you then look at, how you will judge the price for them. Well, you can do something specific to create specific anchors before you then get down to the listing. So let's say your default search is the most popular items at the top to the least popular items at the bottom. And that becomes self-fulfilling then, because if you're showing the most popular items first, they're bound to sell more. And you then embed that sort order. That's never going to change now, once you've decided that. And let's say the first handbag that somebody's going to see is a £120 handbag. Well, if the next ones are 80, 70, 80, 90, well, that 120 actually looks a bit expensive. That's created an anchor that says, that's quite well, at least these are a little bit cheaper, but not much. If, on the other hand, it's 120 and then the next one is 140 and then 160, 150, 160 again, that first one creates kind of an anchor. Oh, yeah, this is a website for handbags that's around about 120, and then you get to the rest of, wow, that's getting a bit expensive. What you could do is, above that listing, you could have 3 hero products. And you can call them anything. You can call them our favourite products, our most popular products. I don't care what you call them, but you're picking 3 products there whose only job is just to create an anchor. So that when people get down to the listing, it's not the first item that they see that becomes an anchor. That's treated equally along with everything else. So in my example, if that first item is a 120, and it doesn't really then matter whether the following handbags go up or down a bit, if I had 3 hero handbags, one was 180, one was 170, one was 210, and it was our most luxury handbags. Yep. That creates an anchor, and that then makes the rest of the handbags that you look at feel slightly less expensive. But an anchor is going to be created no matter what you do. So the question really is, are you leaving it to chance, or are you planning that anchor?
And what about the actual number itself? Because I'm thinking people buying a house and they're only looking for a detached house of more than £400,000 in a particular locality. And therefore, anything 399 and below is now qualified out of that search simply because of the filter. What's your recommendation to people about how they price a specific service or product to try to beat the algorithm or make sure that we're still in the consumer's eye?
House price is an interesting one. A lot of estate agents always price a house on a right move boundary. So you might be looking for a new house. So you're thinking, we can afford £400,000 maximum. So we're going to look in the 350 to 400,000 pound band. If the estate agent is knowing that, if the estate agent is putting a house on the market and they're actually trying to get 405,000 pounds for it, they might actually decide to price it exactly at 400,000, because then they get everybody that's searching in the 350 to 400 and everybody that's in the 400 to 450 bands. So they double the number of viewings. And what they're hoping is that there'll be enough interest that it turns into a bit of an auction and people push the price up. So that's one approach. What I said a week ago in conferences, I would actually do it slightly differently. If I'm particularly targeting the 400 to 450,000 pound band, I would want to be into that band. So I'm not attracting people who are going to come along and just do silly offers. Because if you get lots of them coming through with the silly offers, you might end up reducing the price just to meet them. And there could have been somebody, taking a week longer, who would have loved the house and been in that higher band. But I would also use precision. So I wouldn't be close to the boundary. So if we thought the value of the house is somewhere around about 405,000, I would actually price it at 407,300 pounds, something that looks really precise. So it's properly into that boundary, but it also looks like there's some science behind it. We've worked out exactly what the price, the real value of that house is, £7,300. It's not 399,995, or it's not 410, because we tend to do things like that in round numbers. Yeah. And that applies in almost every area. You're talking earlier about launching a new service. Was it management consulting?
Management consultancy, a service of a website, but it has a range of different services that could be taken off depending on how much the customer is willing to pay.
Right. So if you were launching a new service, management consulting, whatever it might be, and you decide to use a day rate, and your day rate might be 1,800, and you think that's, looking at the market and the competition, I think £1,800 or 2,000 even. But £1,800 clearly a roundish number. If it was £1,830, well, now it looks, there must have been some signs there. Where did that 30 come from? It feels less like you've done that. And there's a lot of academic research in this area. And it turns out, this was the first bit of research I came across was with regard to house prices in America. 27,000 house sales in America were analysed. The more precise the initial asking price, the less negotiation took place. Because precise numbers feel like there's some science behind it. And people are less likely to feel guilty negotiating almost. They're reluctant to negotiate because they trust that you've worked something out. Now, house sales, B2C, but Harvard Business Review did exactly the same analysis. They published an analysis of buying and selling businesses, and they saw exactly the same thing. If you own a business and you decide that you're going to sell the business and retire to your desert island, the more precise that business is offered onto the marketplace, the less negotiation takes place.
Well, let's just unpick that, because the negotiation part of what you spoke about was really insightful for me, in that if we started with let's say the price was £10,000 for a consultancy service and you're wanting to beat me down, tell me about that anchor points of how we play with that negotiation in a way that arms us as the selling.
Yeah. So let's move away from the day rate as an example. So you're launching this consultancy, and somebody's come to you with a project, and you look at it and you think it's roughly £10,000 worth of work. Well, if you say £10,000 to somebody, that does feel to them like you've just gone, yeah, let's make up a number. And you are inviting them to say, yeah, I was thinking 7,000. If you can make up a number, I can make up a number. But there's a subtle thing going on. So if you say £10,000, you're hinting that any negotiation that takes place, you're going to go up and down in £1,000 and maybe £500 increments. If instead you quoted £11,180, well, now it looks like it's a really precise number. You've figured it out, and you're much less likely for them to turn around and just say, or whatever back. Plus, you're hinting that negotiation will take place in hundreds and tens, because you've gone to that level of precision. And they might turn around and say, let's just round it down to 11,000, shall we? Well, fine. That's higher than my initial idea was anyway. So I'm perfectly happy with that.
Could you just play with your your paper and notepad, because you did kind of play with your paper and notepad in that negotiation role play and demonstrated how that looks.
Okay, so I'm going to use my pretend that this is
that sounds great, David, but 11,257, it's a bit more than we can maybe afford, David. I was thinking maybe 10.
Yeah. So if you do get that pushback, and if you deal with professional buyers, and I have in the past, professional buyers, it doesn't matter what you quote, they will push back. They're trained to do so. You know, when you saw me speak, you know, my joke was that I think that when professional buyers go into the bathroom in the morning, before they even brush their teeth, they practice going in the mirror just to get the face warmed up. And it's true. You know, they are trained. No matter what you say, they will push back. So you quote the whatever number, 10,000 or whatever, and you'll get that's more than we were planning to spend. You know, what's the best price that you could manage? And a lot of people at that point will either knock a big number off, or they'll say, "Oh, I can knock 10% off." Well, again, if you say something like 10%, it's a number that you've just plucked out of thin air. If 10% works, why not 11, 12, 13, 14? So what I suggest, plus, if you say 10%, again, you're hinting that negotiation will take place in tens of fives of a percent. They may well turn around and say, I was really hoping for 30. Should we meet in the middle and call it 20? If instead you get a pencil and paper out and you genuinely, do some work, and you add that up and the calculator, I could do 3.9%. Well, now you've worked something out. You haven't just made a number up. There's some science behind it. And if they push you up to 5%, that's not the end of the world. It's better than meeting in the middle at 20. But it just means when you say 3.9%, negotiation is much more likely to be in ones and 0.1s of a percent rather than tens and fives of a percent. And it all just gives you that little bit of an advantage.
I think that's genius. If anybody out there is pricing, just rewind that bit and think about your normal tactics on negotiation and how you command that space when somebody is trying to get you down, just pausing for a little bit and making it look genuinely as though you've just created a 3.9% discount. By the way, just for transparency, I don't negotiate and neither does David, so don't try and do that to us. Can you just help me with, let's say we're doing that management consultancy. Is there merit on platinum, gold, silver about how we package up the service representative to how the buyer wants to commit to it?
There's some psychology behind that as well. If you put 3 options in front of people, it means that they feel that they have some control in the matter. Plus, there are 2 other things on the go. One is when you only put 1 option in front of somebody, the only thing that their subconscious can do is remember any time they bought the same thing in the past or a substitute or an alternative or other quotes that they've had, and the subconscious then processes all of that and makes a decision. You've either got the sale or you haven't. If you put 3 options in front of a customer, the subconscious goes, thank goodness, I don't have to do all that hard work, remembering all that other stuff and thinking about substitutes and alternatives. All I have to do is compare the 3 prices in front of me. Well, I'll go for that one, thanks. In general, if you put 3 prices in front of somebody, it's more likely that they will choose between your 3 than between you and somebody else. Plus, the second thing that I said was happening there is there's something called the Goldilocks heuristic. If we're given 3 options, people tend to go for the middle. Now, I'm a fellow in the Professional Speaking Association. I've talked about this with my fellow speakers, and a number of them have come up to me since they started to adopt all of this. One of them in particular, she speaks about communication and standing out, differentiating yourself in the marketplace. And I'm trying to describe her without being too precise, because what she said was she'd adopted that. There's the price that she used to go out with, but what she's done is she's created a value add and a value add option to create the 3. And that's important. I don't want anybody to think that what I want them to do is take cost out so they can create a discounted option and more cost out to create a discounted. I want to go up in value and up in value. So she's done that, expecting that it might make it a little easier to sell this one because of these 2 reference points. The majority of what she sells now is the middle one, and she never expected to sell any of the top one at all. And she actually sells some of those as well.
So I think the real golden thread there is never compromise on the quality of what you're going to put across, because that damages your reputation. Bake value into the proposition so that there's a benefit for the purchase.
And every single one of the people listening to this should know what value means for their customers better than the customers do themselves. Because whatever you do, you're doing day in, day out with customers, with many different customers, lots and lots and lots of customers, whereas each individual customer is buying what they're buying once in a blue moon. So you should know what value has meant for other customers, other people, whoever you're talking to at that moment, what have other people like them valued. That will help you to create those bronze, silver, gold. And then when you thinking back to what I was talking about in terms of anchors, I wouldn't call something bronze, silver, gold, by the way. I'd call it essentials, and then expert, and then something else beginning with E that means really outstanding. So you'd have 3 descriptions of the different levels, but I wouldn't present it, here's the bronze, here's the silver, here's the gold. I'll present it, here's the gold, because that creates an anchor, then the silver, then the bronze.
And is it best to do 3, 4, or 2?
Not 2, because there's no middle option. So at least 3. 3 or 5 is what I go for. Not more than 5. The more options you have, the harder it becomes for somebody to make a decision. And there's some very interesting research on that. There's one of the classic pieces of research was in a supermarket to do with jam. And I'll probably get the numbers slightly wrong, but I think on one day the researchers had 30 jams that people could taste between. And then they were given a voucher to go away and they could get a half-priced jam. And something like only about 3% of the people who'd tasted the jams. And on another day, they only had 6. And I think it was something like about 30% of the people who'd tasted. Because fewer jams means that, well, out of those 6, that's the one I like. Out of 30, well, I might not be buying the best one. So it's a weird thing. Too much choice is not necessarily a good thing. But my preference would just be to stick with three options. That keeps it simple. Unless there's a really good reason why you need to have 4 or maybe 5, I would just stick with 3, and I certainly wouldn't go beyond 5.
When we are presenting our price to a consumer, is there a good time of day, poor time of day, day of the week where psychologically we're going to be more keen to say yes?
I haven't come across any research directly into that. The nearest items of research that link into anything like this suggest that you either want to be really early in the day or really late in the day, because the really late in the day is the availability heuristic. You remember more recent things better. How much of this is a family podcast and YouTube?
Go for it.
There was some research. My recollection is that it involved enemas, but either way, it was either enemas or what did they call the scope that colonoscopies? It was either enemas or colonoscopies. And the basic principle was people were split into 2 groups, both of them exactly the same procedure, but one of them at the end of the procedure, they were left for 5 minutes, with the thing still in there, but they were just left for 5 minutes. So however bad the procedure was, that last 5 minutes was a lot less bad. It was more comfortable. And then both groups afterwards were asked, would you go through this procedure again? Or, on a scale of 1 to 10. Now, in theory, the one that had the extra 5 minutes, they should be less likely, because they both had exactly the same procedure. And these guys had another 5 minutes on top of that. And what actually happens is the ones who had the extra 5 minutes, because that's the most recent thing and that's what is easiest to recollect, because that was less intrusive than the first 15, they're more likely to say that they're prepared to go through it again. Similar research has been done with Christmas presents. You have to finish with the big Christmas present. So there's some research that suggests that being the very last thing, there's more salience. Whether that helps you to get a better price or not is hard to say, but there is evidence that the more recent things are more salient in our minds. And there's also evidence that suggests that the very first thing in the day is when you've got the most energy, the most attention, the most engagement. So that's the best I can do. And now you've prompted me. I'm going to go and have a look to see, because that's a really interesting question.
Well, I'm just thinking it's Black Friday and Cyber Monday, and they seem to be framed around a date and a day that is causing the scarcity aspects.
I'd really like to have an opportunity to do some really good data analysis on companies that participate in Black Friday, for example. Does it genuinely increase footfall overall? Because they've got to give a lot of money, a lot of margin away to get the footfall during that day. Are they simply sucking demand out of the next several weeks? You'd have to have somewhere that had multiple different stores and then randomise them or something like that, and run Black Friday in some and not Black Friday and others. But giving a discount away to get footfall is very expensive.
Completely. And it's you also could be attracting people, as in that sort of Jaguar example, you could be attracting the wrong type of purple into your brand for the long term.
Yeah.
Can you just help us with price and purpose, whereby we're pricing, let's say we are in a blue ocean, we've got the single commodity product that nobody else has got. How do we marry that dilemma between pricing and purpose, doing things for the right thing for the long term?
It's really interesting that for me, there is an ethical side to pricing. This is not about gouging or ripping customers off. I think price gouging, we saw that during COVID, didn't we? When hand sanitizer went from £2 a bottle to £20-30 a bottle. That's just gouging. My view of pricing is I want good organisations who deliver genuine value to earn a fair return for that value, because then they can grow. Well, that creates career opportunities for people. They can invest in training their teams and upskilling them. They can have really nice working environments. If you're operating on wafer-thin margins, then anytime there's a downturn, anytime there's a problem in your particular market, you could easily go bust. The environment that people work in is probably a little bit grotty. It's not very good. So for me, there is an ethical side to charging appropriately for the value that you deliver, but not going beyond. That's where, if you're in that blue ocean, you've got the one commodity that everybody has to have and you can price it almost anywhere. One of the considerations is around how you feel about the pricing. But another aspect of it is the strategic side of things. So let's say that you have done that, but it takes you 10 years each time you need to come up with one of those commodity products. So you're going to live off this for the next 10 years, and it's going to fund the development of the next one. So the drug companies are examples of this. You probably do need to price vastly higher than your production costs, because the cost to produce whatever this item is, that's not the key consideration. It's the cost to develop it and the cost to develop the next generation after it that solves the next problem. So that's a consideration. Then you've got all different aspects of pricing strategy. So, for example, if you're first into a market with something, there are a number of different strategies that you could adopt, depending, and there's no right or wrong. This all depends upon your business and where you think the market's going to go in the future and the position you want to have in the market. So, for example, penetration pricing, you go in low, and then what you're trying to do is maximize the speed with which you can build market share. And then as new competitors come in, your price goes up to match them. The alternative is skimming. There, you do the exact opposite. While there's no competition, you're going very high in the market and maximize your profits in the short term. But then as competitors start to come in, your prices come down to match them. Well, they're opposite. You can't do both. And there's no right or wrong, as I say. And they're not the only strategies regarding launching yourself into a new market. There's high-low pricing. There's all sorts of different things that you can do. It depends upon the business. It depends upon the business's overall strategy. It depends upon the business's view regarding ethics. It depends upon is the owner of the business, is it a lifestyle business? They don't really, they're not trying to grow it to be a certain size and Google come and buy them. They just want to earn enough for a comfortable lifestyle. Are they going to hand the business over to the next generation? So what they really care about is longevity. So what you're really trying to do with pricing is you're trying to build a fantastic brand in the marketplace and an incredible loyalty with your customers, because this is going to be a multi-generational business. So quite a lot of it depends.
Yeah, and I guess if you do price too high and then the competitor does come in and then the consumer realise they have been skimmed or fleeced, it's going to cause a lot of animosity that you could probably never buy back. David, from your perspective, what rattles your cage with pricing? When do you kind of become a little bit Victor Meldrew with us and say, I don't believe it?
Things as I see that out in the marketplace, the price gouging that I've just discussed, despite spending a lot of my time teaching businesses how to improve their margins, I hate seeing examples of price gouging. And all the stuff around COVID, that was one example. There are companies out there whose strategy, they're in the drugs market, and their strategy is to wait for drugs to become out of patent and for other manufacturers to stop manufacturing them. And then they buy up the license to manufacture that drug. And once they are the only manufacturer of that drug in the market, they suddenly go 3,000, 30,000% increase. The drug might go from £1.90 up to £270 or something ridiculous, or yeah, and they're going to milk that drug until nobody buys it anymore. I think that's obnoxious. It's a business strategy, and there's a strong pricing element to it, but that would bring the Victor Meldrew out in me strongly.
All right. What about surge pricing, the Uber model or the Oasis ticket model, where you've got so much demand for the supply? What's your view on that?
I think those are two different things. I think Uber, from a surge pricing point of view, but all of this is dynamic pricing. I think they're closer to hotels or Ryanair, flights. And effectively what they're doing is they use surge pricing to moderate demand and to maximize utilization. So if you take Ryanair for an example, the price of a particular flight might go up and down in the months preceding it, because what they want to do is they want to use pricing as a mechanism to make sure that every single seat is full. Because once that plane takes off, there are 3 empty seats. That's it. Those seats have gone. You can't resell them ever. By ensuring that every plane takes off absolutely full, on average, they are creating the lowest possible cost per seat for everybody that was on that plane. Now, some people may have paid more, some people may have paid less, but on average, that's what they're doing. With Uber, the model is, we expect to pick our phone up, go onto Uber, and within 3 or 4 minutes, somebody arrives. Well, if during the rush hour, demand goes up threefold, your wait is going to go through the roof. And the model breaks down. Uber depends fundamentally on, well, when you want one, it's going to be here really quickly. If you're going to wait, well, I might as well just flag a taxi down or book something. So what surge pricing is doing is it's 2 things. By being more expensive, it's bringing more taxi drivers out during that period because they can earn more money in a short period. And at the same time, it's turning some people off. So it's moderating demand back down to the level where you still get the same level of service. So most aspects of dynamic pricing, most examples of that, I think, are good. I think on average, the overall consumer benefits either in terms of service or the lowest average price.
Super cool.
Oasis brought out the Victor Meldrew.
Well, no, we'll get to Oasis in a minute because I can see that you're going to. But thank you for breaking that down on the basis that the higher premium brings more supply to the market, but equally,
yes,
the higher price could say, actually, I'll walk or I'll catch the bus. So it is actually helping create the constant line of service delivery that Uber and others want to stand behind. So thank you for explaining that. That's really, really crystal clear. All right, then, go on your Oasis soapbox then, David. I can see you almost kind of chomping like a thoroughbred racehorse about to jump over the fence.
Well, until they started going through divorces, the band was as rich as God anyway. And what they were doing there, it's a one-off. So they're not moderating demand overall because people can go to the later or find there isn't an alternative way to do an Oasis conference. Or you can't wait an hour later until demand, the surge has stopped or whatever. It's a one-off opportunity, and it's their loyal fans. It's the people who love them most that they are screwing the money out of. The whole buying experience, being on the phone for hours and hours and trying to get to the front of the queue, and then when you get there, you thought it was one price, and it's gone, and there's a psychology there as well. There's a sunk cost element. If you spent 4 or 5 hours, you might have thought, well, okay, the ticket's being promoted at £120. I can afford that. If it goes up to 150, I'll manage 150. And after 5 hours, you get to the front of the queue and they're 250. A lot of people would still press the button because I'm not going to put 5 hours of my life into this. And wow, it's going to be amazing, and I'll still enjoy it. But it really feels as if you're taking your best fans in the world and screwing them. So
I take it you're not going to an Oasis concert then this year, David?
I didn't try and get a ticket.
Neither did I. Where's the next trend from your perspective? If you're consulting a senior C-suite team about pricing, where do you see something that's hot, trending, and a thought leadership topic?
So trending topics, that's an interesting one. For me, in a way, this is and isn't trending. Value is the key thing that I want to talk to my clients about. Value is something we've talked about for decades. So in a way, there's nothing new about that whatsoever. That's been on the go forever. I think I think what is new is the recognition that value is complex. I talked about it being financial and non-financial. You could draw a little matrix for yourself. You could have the top two boxes are financial benefits and the bottom two boxes are non-financial benefits. And then the columns, one column is for the company as a whole, and the other one is for the individual making the decision. And I think it's starting to dawn on organizations that value isn't just, well, if we do a good job, everybody's going to know. Or on our website, we're going to tell people we were founded in 1872 and we've been around doing this and we've invested in the most advanced 7-dimensional or 7-axis CNC machines doing blah, 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 all of which is communicating, hey, if we're great, you're going to get the benefit, but is not really spelling out the value that the customer is going to get. So for me, there are two parts. The first part is, thinking about that matrix I've just described, really thoroughly understanding what value means to the customer. But then the other part is clearly communicating it. Because the core message, when I'm talking to an audience, it's not the customer's job to work out what value they are going to get from you. It's your job to clearly communicate that value. And time again, I see organizations that are not clearly communicating that value. And that means they're not clearly justifying the price that they would like to charge. And that makes it hard for them in the marketplace. So whether that's a trend, I'm trying to make it a trend because far too many times I see really poor examples of communicating that value.
Is it questions? So you look at Tesco, every little helps, John Lewis, never knowingly undersold. Are those statements that are creating the value intent from a perspective of what they're trying to do? Is that a value statement or is that just a strap line?
It's just a strapline, really. If there are some straplines which I love, the ultimate driving machine, the best 4x4 by far, reassuring, the expensive Stella Artois. There are some straplines that I love, but you're trying to capture the essence of something, the differentiator in 3, 4, 5, 6 words. That's not genuinely communicating the value that the customer is going to receive. It usually takes a little bit more than that. But it doesn't have to take too much. If the people listening to this and watching this want to go to a website, check out a website from a company called Cyclops Marine. Now, they make strain gauges for the rigging on racing yachts and racing catamarans. So they sell to racing teams. So it's a B2B sale, but it's quite a specialist B2B sale. And when you land on their website, it could start with how rugged our strain gauges are and how accurate our strain gauges are, and we've got twice the length of warranty of anybody else in the marketplace, and they're salt resistant this and that's what 95% of the websites or the pitch documents I ever see. Look at the fantastic clients we've worked with. Wow, aren't we brilliant? Aren't you glad to be working with us? Instead, their website starts, remember your best race. The boat was pointing higher, going faster. And then it goes on to say strain gauges from Cyclops Marine, designed with the minds of Cambridge University and Ineos Team UK, allow you to find those conditions again and again, to protect your rigging. I can't remember it word for word, but that's the essence of it. What they're saying is, your value for you is winning a race. You remember what it was like the last time you were in that kind of position. Our products help you to find that setup every single time. That's the value that they're selling. Now, if you want to read about how salt resistant the strain gauges are and how accurate they are, fine, fill your boots. The rest of the website will tell you. But they start with that, that strong value element.
Yeah, I say to many clients that I'm working with, take out the I, take out the we, and transfer it to you. So as opposed to we offer you a great corporate gifting exercise, you will experience you're still the same thing, but we're putting the spotlight on the recipient as opposed to us as the hero. Yeah.
Well, the way the top of their web homepage, remember your best race.
Yeah.
Immediately in the first 4 words, they're putting you at the center of the conversation.
Okay. We're going to get to the end. I stopped you in mid-flow about a trend on dynamic pricing. Would you like to tell us about that?
Just that if there's a trend in pricing at the moment that's not about what I'd like it to be, value, a lot of organizations are talking about dynamic pricing and applying it in all sorts of different areas. I haven't seen that happening yet. Dynamic pricing still tends to just operate in the obvious areas like flights and hotel rooms. But it would be interesting to see whether that is adopted in, McDonald's, for example. Should McDonald's have dynamic pricing during the busy times? And I doubt if they would, but it will be interesting to see how that develops over time.
Well, the psychology of the human being is you look at congestion charging or plastic bags, and once you've got an impingement to purchase, it's funny how the psychology of a human can be governed by a few different pricing points of price.
Yes.
Yeah.
Little things making a big difference. Yeah.
Before we get to your 3 fundamentals for leading a long and life full, David, is there anything that I've not allowed you to give us your sage advice on?
No, I think we've covered most of the key things. I could add one extra little tip for everybody, which is most organizations, there's a whole load of stuff that they include as part of their service or their product, whatever it might be, because there's often service elements around products and stuff, and they don't remind customers about those at the point of quotation. And that's something that makes it harder for a customer to compare what you do against somebody else. So if you're putting a quotation together, that's the point at which you want to remind them. And by the way, don't forget, when you work with us, you also get this, and this included. So there's one extra tip there, but I think we've covered a lot of the important stuff.
Well, I just thought we haven't covered AI in terms of how AI can work for you against the price competition matrix of benchmarking. Do you see any trending around that to enable you to position your price in the right place?
I haven't yet, and I'm unsure as to AI accuracy. There was the whole thing about ChatGPT hallucinating data and statistics. So I'm cautious. I believe it's getting better. So it's probably at the point where you can ask it genuine questions or offer genuine advice. If we were to launch this product with these features for this target audience, with these competitors, and here's some information on them, and here's where they typically price themselves, what do you think the actual value is that we're delivering to the customer? Where do you think we should be positioning ourselves on price? How do we then communicate the value that we're going to deliver? I can imagine that being asked. But whatever ChatGPT came back with, I'd want to check every single thing in there to make sure it wasn't a hallucination.
No, I completely agree. Validation is important, but also your prompt was very insightful and specific about what you're wanting the AI to go and find for you. Yeah.
The more specific, the better. And then you can refine it. Whatever it comes back with, you can say, that was very good. But now also, add in this element, or consider this, or I don't think you did such and such. Go into that particular aspect in more depth, please. So you don't have to take the first answer that comes back. You can improve it.
Well, I would urge anybody who is interested about David Abbott speaker.com is his website. Very, very personable and value-adding speaker. And he really makes you think. He's got some props that he brings with him. I'll not give the game away there about what he brings in order for you to understand how price can be perceived at one point to the other. And I really want to appreciate you for giving that estate agent that extra $250,000. I haven't quite got that amount of benefit, but I've definitely applied some of your tactics. I'll not say which one in case a client is listening. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for those insightful gifts that you've given people through the power of voice. It's brilliant.
Total pleasure.
David, what would be your 3 fundamentals for living a long, healthy, long life that you're going to pay to your 90-year-old self?
I think for me, one bit is about taking care of yourself. I like to chase small balls around.
Sorry?
So I play hockey and racquetball. Used to be squash, and then I got older, and racquetball became easier. And I get the bike out and occasionally go for a run. And it's just, the better you treat your body, the healthier you're going to be, and the better the old age when you get there. So I think one thing is about taking good care of yourself, diet, and all the rest of it. There's the mental side as well, and that means the friends, family, and these things are not givens. You've got to work at them. It's spend time with your friends and assume that they're always going to be around. But make the time to get out there and have a pint or a curry and whatever it might be, and spend time with people. And I think a third thing would be we only get the one shot at this, so let's enjoy the journey. If at all possible, if you're doing something that you're not enjoying, try and find something that you do. I know in some circumstances that's easier said than done. We spend far too much of our waking life at work or working for it to be miserable. It's roughly a third sleeping, a third working, a third doing things that we enjoy. And to have a whole third of your life doing something miserable or being unhappy, that would be a real shame. Let's enjoy the journey, find things that we can enjoy, that excite us, that get us out of bed in the morning.
And to put a nice little bow on it, what's the price of the lost opportunity of not taking that jump and that leap of faith? Yeah.
Priceless.
Priceless. Very good. You'll take good care of yourself, exercise, have great relationships, and enjoy the journey. David Abbott, I want to appreciate you for bringing such insight and wisdom to the screen today. And if, like I said, davidabbotspeaker.com, if you see him speaking, book and just say yes, because I guarantee you, you will get more than your price of your ticket worth back by listening to what he says.
Really enjoyed talking to you, Chris, and I hope this has been of help and value to the listeners and the watchers.
It has. Thank you very much.